Hey everyone, this is Nick coming back at you with another video. Hope you're doing well out there. Today we're going to talk about kind of how the mind works, consciousness works, kind of some of the tendencies of sentient consciousness that can be a little confusing to the person or to the personality. And so one of the examples that I usually give, like when we watch a scary movie or like an intense drama on TV or something like that, we notice our hair standing on end, or we're getting goosebumps, or we have a racing heartbeat. We're like, oh my God, what's happening to the person? And the reason that happens is because our mind, our biological mind, does not differentiate between physical experience and what we are perceiving through our senses, like our eyes and our ears, as we're watching the television or even reading a book and watching the book, quote unquote, in our mind or in our imagination. And this type of exposure to our brain long term can cause certain idiosyncrasies or some disconcerting thoughts. So we want to be really careful about what we expose our biological mind to, as we are the observer or the conductor of this organism called human, and we're or human consciousness, and we're the ones who actually wield the consciousness, point it in certain directions, either TV or in nature, plants and animals. And so it's all up to us, and that's why it's so important, and that's why we're going over this stuff today in this video. So we're talking about homophones today. Have you heard of it? So another part of what our consciousness does when it's exposed to ideas, because of how it works, our mind usually only considers, or at least our subconscious only considers, the subject or the noun of the sentence or whatever idea we're attempting to convey. And so this is some advanced psychology here that a lot of different people know about and use in certain ways in advertising and politics like that. And some of the people who are the targets of these kinds of advertisements or political agendas may not be aware of this function of consciousness or how it actually works. So I just typed in a couple of broad ideas that we are exposed to in the media, social media, and TV. And so you have vote or die. And the idea is voting is important, and if you don't do it, you're going to die. And so this is a verb, the vote, and then die, right? And so what our consciousness centralizes on is this die. Rather than say vote to live, they say vote or die. Right? It's a very subtle difference that really has a profound effect on our consciousness. So let's move along here. Another one is, in the news you always see these race conflations, and they say stop hate instead of make love, or instead of the opposite of, or instead of the actual thing you're trying to convey is be more loving. But no, we're trying to stop hate. Why? Because they want our consciousness to perceive this idea of hate, these ideas of death, right? Because it really gets us going because of how our nervous system works and the preservation of our animal instincts. So, okay, let's do another one. Black Lives Matter. Okay, so when we say Black Lives Matter, it implies that Black lives don't matter, right? And that's the whole rendition behind this movement. These Black lives, so-called, don't matter to police and politicians, the prison systems, social justice doesn't matter to these entities or institutions. But when we as a person say Black Lives Matter, we're telling ourselves at the same time as if they don't matter. So we have to actually say Black lives do matter. But every time we say that, we're telling ourselves that Black lives don't matter, right? And then you have the All Lives Matter people, and they're saying the same thing, all lives matter. But that implies that lives don't matter, right? And in fact, in reality, the government or these institutions, lives don't mean a lot to them because of how the police treats the people, how the corporations treat their workers, like Amazon, stuff like that. So it's another very subtle, super subtle point. And let's see here. Yeah, so now we're just going into further into ideas and how these ideas affect our consciousness and our outlook and our perceptions and our ability to perceive things that might be more subtle, like subtleties. So here's another good example that I always give in my classes. Infinite, okay? We type in synonyms, infinite. When we're trying to say infinite, right, it goes on forever, right? But in saying infinite, we say finite. So we're saying not finite, but still, our mind just says finite. It just perceives finite. Our conscious mind is then coming in and saying not finite or infinite, right? And language, the English language is made to function in this way for whatever reason you want to put under there, But there's no doubt that this is occurring. I mean, our language has very few characters and very few words compared to some of the other traditions, like the Chinese characters. There's like infinite Chinese characters, or the Vedic language, and their words have 6 or 7 symbols quite often, and our words are very simplistic compared to them, as well as the thoughts. And so let's go into the synonyms now. Boundless, unbounded. So we're saying bound. We're telling the consciousness, the mind, we're telling bound. Unlimited. Okay, we're unlimited, but yet we're still limited. So our unconscious only perceives the limit, but our conscious mind perceives the unlimited. So it's the opposite, right? Limitless. Okay, there's no limits, but yet we're saying limit again, right? Measureless. We're still measuring something. And this is the only good one that I could find, like cosmic or forever, or everlasting. These types of ideas are the actual meaning that we want to convey. For instance, like never ending, we still say end, bound, finite. So this is a super subtle idea that has a real impact on our subconscious. And you don't ever hear about this stuff from anywhere. And that's exactly why, because it facilitates this type of thinking. That's why. Okay, so here's another good one. ISIS, right? When you type in ISIS, you see all these guys. They're fighting. They're fighting. And let's see. The true meaning of ISIS is from Egypt or Africa, and even predating these cultures. Isis and Horus, just like Mary and Jesus, religious iconography. So they name themselves ISIS for whatever reason, but what ends up happening is it's a conflation now in our mind. And now when we think of Isis, we don't think of the mother of all life, the birth giver, goddess, right? Because that's how language works. It's super, super subtle, super subtle. Okay, so now let's go over some other aspects of language. So we have some common sayings that I wrote down here. Good morning. Okay, everybody says good morning, right? And if we look over here on our homophones, let's see here. Yeah, we have a list of homophones. Words that sound the same, they could be spelt the same, pronounced differently. There's all kinds of these variations. And so, just like in the other examples, our conscious mind may perceive certain things while our unconscious mind does not perceive the difference, like we went over before. So every time we're saying good morning, every time we say good morning, it's a homophone of morning. And then, so why do we say this, right? Well, it's because in the West, we're a culture derived from the story of Jesus. And so the day after his death, supposedly, we said, oh, is it a good morning for you, right? And then through the game of telephone and time, it just turned into our standard greeting, good morning. So every time we say to someone, good morning, we're saying mourning. We are mourning. We're mourning the day of Jesus, right? The death of Jesus. And so these are just things to be aware of. We want to say buenos dias or something like that, instead of using this mourning word. Okay, so let's move on here. This is a kind of a really common one also, days of the week. And then what we're actually saying is days of the week. The people who have to work the regular 9-to-5 jobs. These are the days of the week, right? Instead of making a successful business and perhaps transcending your weekly schedule, your day-to-day mundane existence by creating a successful business and applying your conscious will and intent, we're in this days of the week. We're punching the clock at our job that we don't like. Quite a number of us are, at least. Okay, so now let's keep going. Holidays. Holy days. The holy days, right? Still saying days. D-A-Z-E. Holy. Holy, like it's comprised of wholes. And then when we say whole, like the whole thing, or I am whole, we're still saying whole. Like there's something not in the middle of it, right? So it's really subtle, okay? It's very subtle, very, very subtle, but it has a huge impact on our subconscious, and that's why we have to really work through these ideas and get familiar with them and really hit this hard, because it has a really big impact on our overall well-being and our happiness. And that directly translates to how susceptible someone might be to anxiety about politics or global warming or all these things. When you watch the TV, the TV is not filled with much joy. It's usually sadness and anxiety and all these things that don't suit us. And then they of course color our conscious intent, and it spills over into our waking life. And so that's why we want to make sure that we are becoming aware of our word choice. We're consciously using words that empower us from a moment-to-moment basis from now on, now that you know about this. Okay, so here's another one. Idol worship. They talk about this in religion, idol worship. And so this is just another example. Idle, you're idle, not doing anything, but you're a warship. Our conscious intent as an individual, people change the world all the time. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. That could technically be construed as a ship, and then a warship if you're being threatened. Martin Luther King standing up for everybody. Cesar Chavez standing up for everybody when things are being when you're under attack, you have to go to war, but you're idle because you're worshiping idols. You're thinking, oh, Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad is such a great person, and they're so farther above us, and we have to worship this idol, but or this image, but in doing so, we're actually idle. Instead of becoming Buddha, becoming Jesus, becoming Muhammad, we're just remaining idle and not doing anything. So that's why we want to really make sure to take a handle on our words and our ideas, especially in our thoughts, before we even speak them into existence. We want to make sure that all of these words or ideas that we're using in our mind empower us and facilitate this expansion, this cosmic expansion of awareness, everlasting awareness, whatever you want to call it. It's been given many names throughout the ages. And yeah, we're just chipping away at this whole thing. Pretty much that we've always been fascinated as a people with philosophy and some of these ideas that kind of are have always been controversial. Like I always say, the story of Jesus, it's like, whoa, super controversial. He was against being being a slave, and yet he the story of life, at least the story of his life, at least during that time, it was very controversial. He's messing with the status quo, just like Cesar Chavez or Martin Luther King. From some people's perspective, it's not controversial at all. I mean, it makes total sense. But then to other people, they're like, whoa, this is super controversial. We don't want to rock the boat too much. But yeah, we do want to rock the boat because we want to make a life worth living, right? And that's why we want to make sure to use the right words that will help us do that. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. It's a real subtle one. Thanks for sticking around.